Hello, good morning everybody. It's good to see you for another of our Fabrica fellow lectures. I'm super happy to welcome Dean Brown, a generation of Fabricante that I'm honored to meet today. So it's always great to have an old member of our community come and introduce or talk and give a bit of a introduction of what happened after Fabrica and even before, no? For what I understand. I mean, I'm going to do a very short introduction. So Dean Brown was actually in Fabrica from 2010, 2014. After that, he created his office and studio Brown Office in 2014, where he has worked together a team for clients including Google, Uniqlo, Campari, Depop, and of course his work has been presented in collections of the VA, the Barbican Library, the Museum of the Home, and the London Design Festival, just to name a few. And just a warm welcome to Dean, and thank you for coming and sharing with the new community of Fabricantes your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Dean, and I'm going to give a talk called Before, During, and After Fabrica. Hello, ciao, buongiorno. Yeah, as my work is all kinds of things within this kind of 3D space. So objects, installations, interiors, and research. I design and make objects like this, installations such as these, and increasingly interior projects. I also make self-initiated, more experimental research projects. And my process that I suppose kind of pulls these things together is really about a commitment to materiality, to often elevating simple materials and using color. I think narrative is also quite significant in my work, storytelling. So to really introduce my practice, I'm going to explain a few places that I've been, and it kind of centers around the Fabrica experience, which you'll see in a minute. So before Fabrica, 2001 till 2009, my first job in design was a Saturday job with a treehouse company in a small town near where I live in rural Scotland. So I was going in there on a Saturday and making these treehouse drawings. I was about 16 at the time. Soon after, I went to university in Dundee in Scotland. This is Duncans of Jordanstone College of Art and Design, and I studied a course called Product Design there. My graduation project was this thing. It's called the Table with a View, and it's a bedside table that allows you to wake up to a view that is different from that of your own bedroom. And it does this by having remote cameras that kind of create a live feed to the screen on the table. So you can wake up and you can switch on this screen and you have this kind of remote vista into another world outside of your own bedroom. And you can hang it on your washing line, you can have it in a field somewhere else nearby. People were putting it on their bird tables in their garden, or indeed like filming breakfasts in a room within your house. And this was a fully working system. I built it so that it could be like kind of tested and functioning and deployed with people. And really it was about hacking a CCTV system and more significantly, rethinking what a CCTV system could do. CCTV is often about privacy, it's often about spying, and I really like the idea that you could kind of recontextualize what CCTV could be used for into something that was much more playful and much more experiential. So I graduated, and after graduation, I was offered this thing called Designer in Residence at the art school in Dundee, and that meant that I could kind of start doing my own projects, but I was supported and incubated within a university, which is a really nice situation to be in because you get all the workshops, you get kind of support from tutors, but it was a very kind of like supportive step into starting my own work. And I did that for about 2 years, and I designed things like these. That's an iPod speaker on the top left. Anyone who knows what an iPod is? So it was a really fun period, sort of making projects with friends and, yeah, having a good time. And one of my takeaways from that period is really about not being afraid of playing with technology. Technology is a material, and I'm not necessarily like a coder or a kind of techie guy, but the teaching there at the time was really strong on this idea that you could play with technology in whichever way that you wanted to. And I still kind of think that's a really good piece of advice. So during 2010, I moved from Dundee to Treviso, and I got the email from Monica. I guess almost everyone here did as well. Obviously, like in this room, we all know what Fabrica looks like, but I believe we have some people on YouTube who may be sort of unaware of how amazing this place is. So we were like in this kind of Tadoando renovated Italian villa, and you have this really incredible kind of collision of sort of classical Italian sort of rural stuff, but then it's also concrete and glass and kind of very dramatic curves. It's an amazing building, and the room that we were in just now, for anyone kind of remotely, is next to the lake. We're in the auditorium. So whenever I joined Fabrica, I was part of the design team, and it was led at the time by a guy called Sam Baron, and we were a group of product designers, furniture designers, but also graphic designers, photographer, studio manager. There's Marta. Marta's in the audience. And, you know, of course, there's other things going on at Fabrica at the time, video departments, graphics departments, Colours magazine, all sorts of other interesting things. And also an extension of Fabrica for me was the fabricators within this area of Italy. It's a really rich area for making. And at the time, I was making products such as these. And also trying other things like designing a rug. This is a rug that was created for a project at Villa Necchi during Milan Design Week, I believe, in 2012. Yes, that's correct. And then sort of, I guess, designing things that are kind of even more undefinable in a way. An installation for a rug company called Taiping, and this was in Paris. My favorite project from Fabrica, for sure, is this thing called the Mobile Museum. And I collaborated with a friend and fellow resident called Philip Bone. Phil's a graphic designer, so between myself and Phil, we created a mini pop-up museum. And I guess the thing about museums usually is they're very old, they're very kind of institutional, they're very heavy, they're very big, very bureaucratic. And we liked the idea that you could create a museum that was an alternative to those things, that could travel kind of lightly and easily, and it could host exhibitions in places where maybe you didn't have a museum. And this project really took off. It went from Milan to London, Brussels, Luxembourg, Helsinki, Hong Kong, Beijing, over something like a 2-year period. This is our last show in Beijing, and every time we did an exhibition, we made an open call, and any creative could send us something in response to a theme, and we received like all sorts of things from people worldwide, and it was a really nice experience. Interesting facts, the structure for the Mobile Museum is based on a structure that I acquired when I was a student in Dundee. So I don't know what it is, I still don't know, but I think it's like my guess is a fishing tent. I think it's like a kind of, like a foldable structure that you can kind of put a canvas over, and then maybe you sit by a river and do some fishing, or maybe an agricultural object. I'm curious to know. If anyone knows, let me know. But the really significant thing about it, I guess, was it was a lost object. It's a very kind of redundant object, and it's a really beautiful way to create this like small kind of room. So it kind of opens and closes and just creates this very beautiful little space. And we love the idea that you could reinterpret that and give it a new life, and sort of create other versions of a room. And actually the Mobile Museum is part of a bigger collection of objects called Next Caban. So there's other examples of things that residents did at the time with this kind of starting point. As well as kind of individually authored projects, we collaborated a lot as part of the design team, and we made some projects for United Colours of Benetton. So this is some retail furniture for kind of in-store. Also a pop-up shop in New York. This was exclusively about wool, and it was occupying a garage in Manhattan. I think it was on for about 6 months. It was a really interesting thing to be part of. So, there's so many things I can say about Fabrica, but I think the thing I want to say now is I just really kind of discovered myself creatively through doing lots and lots of projects. And, there's nothing better than, just getting to do stuff. And through doing stuff and trying stuff, you really start to find kind of what you like and what you don't like, and kind of find your way. So after, this is now 2014, and I relocated to London to start my own studio, which is called Brown Office. One of my first commissions in London was actually in Paris, and the thing about this commission was that it was recommended to me, I guess it came to me because Sam, the creative director, Sam Baron, he kind of put in a good word with this company. So thanks, Sam. I really appreciate it. Sèvres is just this unbelievable place. It's a porcelain factory, probably the best porcelain factory in the world. And it was a very sort of loose invitation to make a project together. And I took inspiration from the factory. For you to know, they kind of historically make things like what's on the left. And then in more recent times, they make projects with people like Ettore Sottsass, Andrea Branzi, Naoto Fukasawa. And they have this just really striking kind of factory. It's a huge place, many, many rooms, many buildings. And I was kind of looking for inspiration somehow in the process. What struck me was they were really good on color. They have these amazing pigments for glazing ceramics. But then also in contrast to that, they are, I think, the inventors of this technique called biscuit. So it's the firing of porcelain that is unglazed. So there's this kind of interesting and strange contrast in this kind of the significance of biscuit, but also the significance of color. And I got really into these like process objects. This is like a kind of a Pantone color chart for Sèvres. And I got really into speaking with people like Olivier, who is someone who works in their color department. And somehow I felt like I wanted to reveal something of the magic of the factory in the final object. It's often very difficult when you look at a final object to really understand where it was made and sort of kind of appreciate the kind of the qualities of where it was made. And I tried to sort of capture that in the final pieces that I designed. So this is one of 12 vases, and it's almost like an exploded diagram of the ingredients used in the manufacturing process. So the porcelain is kind of decorated by these like glass vessels, and in the vessels is the raw pigment that would usually be used to paint the vase. Here's some other examples. And I like the idea that you can kind of look at this as a blank canvas, and then you can think of how that color may be applied in the different cases. Yeah, interesting fact, this is somewhat made in Treviso. So the porcelain is made in Paris by the company. And I should say that these are sort of classical shapes. They're shapes from their archive. So I was really kind of privileged to sort of be able to select and reinterpret things from their kind of vast history. But everything else, the glass pieces, are blown in Treviso, somewhere around here. So the second kind of London-based commission that I had was actually also not in London. It was in Austria, and in a place called Hollenegg. So this is Alice. She is the custodian and curator of this incredible place called Schloss Hollenegg. It's a castle, and she uses this castle to host and curate and commission young creatives. And every year she has an exhibition in May where she kind of opens up the castle, and all the rooms become kind of exhibition venues. And a lot of the work is kind of made in reference to the castle somehow. So I've made quite a few projects with Alice. This is called the Archive and the Rumpelkammer. It's a display system inspired by a timeline. It also incorporates a desk, so you can kind of walk up those steps and sit amongst this kind of timeline of sorts. Also made in Treviso. The second project for Schloss Hollenegg that I want to talk about in more detail is a reinterpretation of a kitchen. So if you're in residence there, you stay in a turret some of the time, and the downstairs from the turret is this kitchen. So this is where you kind of make your meals if you're a guest in the castle. And Alice asked me to think about redesigning this kitchen. And one of the things that we talked about was the idea that it was kind of in use sometimes, but then at other times of the year when they didn't have anyone there, it was not necessary to be a kitchen. So we created like a narrative around the idea that it could be a piece of furniture that could kind of open and close in sort of interesting and novel ways. So the result was this. This is sometimes kitchen, and it's a kind of transformative kitchen. It has all the kitchen functionality. It also has a sort of room divider effect, and the window that opens on that room divider is a breakfast bar, but it could also be like a catering window. So if there was an event there and you wanted to sort of have kind of front of house and back of house, it allows you to do that. So this is how it opens and closes. The inspiration for the texture was really about looking at the doors of the castle. There's actually quite a few doors in this castle, and it was really nice to kind of look at them and think of a way to reference that in a contemporary way. So the bottom right is this kind of quite classic kind of castle door. And I like the idea that you could reinterpret that using timber. And within this grid, you could have handles here and there, and the handles would kind of give you a clue as to how certain doors opened. You know, doors opened vertically, they opened in different ways. So having handles in certain places gave you a clue as to how to expect that might work. One thing I like about this is that it was made super locally. So this is Schloss Hollenegg on the left, and that's Erwin Pritel's workshop on the right. And I got to walk through the forest from the castle to the workshop. It was very charming. And it was made out of abete timber. It's a very sort of kind of specific timber from Austria, I think. And it felt like a very kind of local kind of vernacular to work in, which I really liked. So this is another project from London. I started to get some traction with like London-based commissions. It's possible that you all know Depop. Depop is an app for selling and buying clothes in a sort of peer-to-peer format. So it's a bit like eBay in terms of the sort of the selling capacity, but it's also a bit like Instagram in the fact that you're also selling your self-image. It's very kind of image-based, persona-based. So I designed all the furniture for their global headquarters in Shoreditch. This is a reception area, storage, there's an outbox. This is a bookshelf. They have a nice kind of rare fashion library. So this was a way to kind of showcase some really interesting fashion journals. And also a packing station. A packing station is a bit of a weird thing to have in a corporate office, or at least the foyer of a corporate office. But for Depop, it was a really nice brand story because in their business, there's lots of kind of clothing coming and going. Like in their office, they have like hundreds of clothes sort of arriving and going out and arriving and going out. And it's a really significant thing to what they do. So I really appreciated that they could have something that was very kind of practical in their foyer, but also something that really reinforced the story of Depop. Often in kind of corporate foyers, you have, I don't know, a chandelier, a sofa. So this was a very different kind of experience of entering their studio. Also made in Treviso, by the way. So there's a product design mantra which is that form follows function, and that's a very classic way of thinking about things. But then there's also something else that says form follows communication, and I think in a lot of my work, it's the second one where it's about a kind of creating a story or creating a narrative, creating something for a brand. And I also wanted to add that I think form follows gumption. Gumption is a kind of Scottish word, and it means being, I don't know, what does it mean? Bold, kind of like taking the initiative, kind of doing things on your own initiative, I suppose. So form follows function, but form also follows gumption. This is another London-based commission for Uniqlo, and it's in collaboration with a studio called Anyways. Anyways is the creative agency that is part of It's Nice That. You probably all know It's Nice That, the blog. So they have a kind of a sister company that does work like this. And yeah, really, really, really good folk. And together we collaborated on this project for Uniqlo. It's their flagship store on Oxford Street. And as the name suggests, it was about promoting heat tech. This was in January, and often what you see in like windows in January are quite health orientated, lots of like smoothie makers and like sort of like quite, I don't know, like kind of about rebooting and getting healthy after Christmas time. And I think this is a very strong kind of thing to do, specifically that time of year, where we just created this very bold installation that that really focused on making you feel warm. We kept coming back to this idea that it should generate this sense of heat. It's not actually hot, but I think it looks hot, and that was what we were trying to do. And it started at street level, and it led you into the store, up the stairs, all the way to what's called the POS tables, which is the point of sale tables, where hopefully you'd buy some heat tech. This is another London-based project at the V&A, Victoria and Albert Museum, and it was a collaboration between myself and a graphic designer called John Abbott. The show is about the Royal Academy of Dance, and their history is the history of ballet. So it's 100 years of ballet and a specific focus on ballet training, what it takes to become a ballet dancer. So it was 3 rooms in the V&A, and this is some examples from the exhibition. One of the things that we did, or one of the things that we kind of realized, is that they had like really interesting kind of historical ballet content, but it was often kind of black and white imagery, quite small images, and quite rich in subject matter, but not necessarily very dynamic. And I think one of the big gestures that we created in this show was trying to sort of create a sense of movement, trying to create a sense of dance out of kind of artifacts that were primarily static. And these kind of lines that you see in the spaces were, a very effective way, I think, to create movement in the space and to do something a little bit bold and contemporary with subject matter that was primarily historical. The other thing that we did was we used pink. Pink is a very sort of ballet cliche color, and I think our initial thought was we should avoid using pink. But in the end, we kind of embraced it, but we used pink in contrast to lots of other colors and lots of other techniques. So it was important that you didn't just walk into a big room that was completely pink, but there's like kind of pink accents here, there, and everywhere, which I think was quite effective. A super recent project with Fabrica. It was really nice to be invited to lead a team for a brand called Campari soda. And we were a group of 5. This was done during lockdown, and it was a completely sort of virtual collaboration, all created on Zoom. Lockdown was challenging in many ways, of course, but it just kind of beckoned in the opportunity to work in this way. And I think this kind of level of international collaboration would have been, I suppose, kind of challenging before that, but it just felt very easy because wherever you were in the world, we could still work together. And that was one of the nice things about this project, for sure. So Campari soda is one of the greatest bottles ever designed. It was designed by an artist called Fortunato De Pero I don't actually know when it was made, but 1920 something, 1930, around about then. It's a futurist artist, and it's like, you've got this bottle, you've got the Coca-Cola bottle, you've got the Orangina bottle. I think those are like the 3 great bottles, in my opinion. So it was really special to sort of kind of work as a source of inspiration. And what we ended up creating was a collection of objects inspired by the iconic silhouette of the Campari soda bottle. So you have quite premium objects like a Bluetooth speaker, a calendar, ceramic tiles, and then you also have these really nice kind of gifting objects like post-it notes and fans and pocket mirrors. This is the first time I've kind of worked in big batch production. These were made in like large numbers, and normally I suppose I work in sort of limited edition or site-specific projects, whereas this was really interesting because we were dialoguing with factories who were making things in like in large amounts. Yeah, so the last set of projects are all very collaborative, and I was going to say it's good to collaborate, but I think I'm actually going to say it's essential to collaborate. Even in projects of mine that are kind of singularly authored by me, you're still kind of relying on the support from photographers, curators, commissioners. It's a really collaborative business, and all the better for it. So if that was a range of quite kind of corporate, high-profile commissions, I also like to make quite kind of self-initiated experimental work as well. This was during lockdown, and I think I really noticed at that time that there was lots of cardboard everywhere. Everyone seemed to be receiving Amazon deliveries and food deliveries, and like there was just boxes piling up. Well, certainly in East London. I live in East London, and it was just like mountains of cardboard everywhere. We got a cat in lockdown, and I started like going a bit mad and making lots of things for my cat, my new client. And I was invited by Jane Withers' studio to make a project for London Design Festival, and I decided that I was going to use this kind of newfound love of cardboard as a way to create an exhibition. So I made all sorts of things out of cardboard, kind of upcycling pizza boxes, delivery boxes. You've got kind of lights, pieces of furniture, kinetic sculptures, a very kind of intuitive, direct kind of, I was almost making like one a day and just like really not thinking about what it was and just making it and making another one. So it culminated in this exhibition in a garage in West London. So this is Brompton Design District. It's a really good kind of part of London Design Festival that's been going for a long time, and if you go to Brompton, you always kind of find sort of interesting experimental work. And they gave me this garage to work in, and it's a very charming sort of West London garage. I like to think of it as the kind of garage that Hugh Grant would have. A second project very recently, so that project was like 1 year ago in September, and then this is a very, very recent project this September, also by the invitation of Jane Withers and her team, and also in this case another curator called Hans Tan, who's from Singapore. He's a really good designer and curator, and he kind of invented this kind of exhibition strategy called R for Repair. And how it works is they receive objects from real people that are in need of repair, and then they give those objects to creatives, and the creatives kind of repair them in a creative way. So it's less about discrete repair, and it's more about repair that's transformative in some way. So this was the second exhibition for London Design Festival at the V&A. And I was given this Winnie the Pooh clock. The top left is the original kind of broken object. And my intuition was to sort of take it apart, like completely take it apart and rebuild it somehow. So my transformation is this. This is the new clock. And the interesting story about this clock is that it's a Walt Disney product. But it's about a British cartoon character, Winnie the Pooh, and it's owned by some sisters called the Yip sisters, who are based in Singapore. So within that one object, you've got this really global kind of story, and I wanted to accentuate that story in the repair. So the top clock is Singapore time, so it's the time of the owners of the clock. And by the way, this repaired object will be given back to the owners, so they will receive it after the exhibition. So one clock is Singapore time. Bottom left clock is Walt Disney time in California. And bottom right is Winnie the Pooh time in East Sussex. And what you can't really see in this image is that everything's moving, so there's about 8 or 9 moving parts. And at the end of the presentation, I can show you a short video of the clock moving. So by introducing more clocks, I was able to introduce a lot more movement. So this was exhibited at the V&A as part of this group show called R for Repair, which involved all sorts of really interesting repair transformations. The starting point for each project was completely different, and the way that people kind of interpreted it was like really kind of broad. Really, really nice thing to be part of. Yeah, I really think that almost anything can be a source of inspiration if you approach it in the right way, like a broken Winnie the Pooh clock or a cardboard box. So that's the end of, I guess, the presentation with regards to my solo work, my work as a studio, Brown office, and I'm going to talk for a little bit longer about another aspect of my work, which is a more collaborative thread as part of a group called the Interaction Research Studio. I'm just going to get some water. How's it going so far? Good, good. So the Interaction Research Studio is a group of designers, academians, creative technologists, sociologists, PhD students, and it's run by Bill Gaver and Andy Boucher, and there's about 9 of us currently. For many years we were based at Goldsmiths University, and we've recently relocated to Northumbria University, which is a really fantastic university in Newcastle, and we are based at their London sort of satellite campus. One of the many projects that I worked on there was My Nature Watch. There's a website called mynaturewatch.net. You should check it out. And at the center of this project is a wildlife camera. And it's a very special wildlife camera in that it's DIY. It's a do-it-yourself kind of kit. And it's controlled by custom software that you can work from your phone. That's all kind of designed within the studio. So we create this kind of recipe for how people can make these cameras by themselves. It's very deliberately kind of simple and straightforward. We want as many people as possible to make these cameras. And also we acknowledge that people who are interested in wildlife are not necessarily interested in technology. And what's really special about this project, I guess, is we're kind of trying to bring those two things together and encourage like wildlife enthusiasts to start making tech. So there's a Raspberry Pi involved in this, if anyone knows a little bit about that kind of thing. This is the kind of photograph that it takes. It uses custom software to detect movement, and you can kind of program the sensitivity of the movement. It takes photographs, it also takes videos. So this is a robin. And we have a huge community of people using this camera. Something like 3,500 people are downloading the software from our website, which gives us a sense of the numbers of people who are building and using these cameras. We were invited to make a project, also for London Design Festival, also with Jane Withers Studio, the name of the curator that I've mentioned a few times. So her team approached us to do something with these cameras in this garden quite close to the V&A, if you know the kind of area of London at all. And the idea was that we would try to sort of document the wildlife that was in this kind of part of London, very kind of built up kind of area within Zone 1, I believe. We were tasked with kind of creating something that was made primarily out of natural materials, and the curators used this word or phrase called animal vernacular. They were really interested in a vernacular that was kind of designed primarily for animals rather than for humans, which is a really interesting kind of invitation. And I suppose we kind of pushed back on that a little bit, and we decided that we wanted to do something that had this kind of collision of the natural and the man-made. We were making a project for like a kind of human design festival in a city, but for animals. So somehow having this kind of contrast, an aesthetic contrast between natural and man-made things really kind of made sense to us for this very particular brief. So one of the first things we did was we started playing around with kind of natural materials, thinking about how you could recase a camera, but not in plastic. Normally we use Tupperwares and things, which are really successful. But how could you do something also in a DIY spirit, but sort of moving away from plastic to an extent, but also having bits of plastic still in there because for the reasons I just described. So these early experiments kind of culminated in what were called nature scenes. And these are a bit like, I guess, a set design, like a kind of a video set, a film set, to encourage animals. So we offered food and shelter and water, and we hoped that we could entice animals to come to these sets. And then within the sets, there was embedded cameras that would then sort of capture their activity. We knew that there was birds, we also knew that there was squirrels, we also knew that there was insects, so we created different things at different scales to hopefully welcome slightly different species. This is the nature scenes deployed in the garden, so hanging from a tree, or positioned in quite dense undergrowth. This very tall one, we hoped would photograph foxes. It's got a camera that points down, and there was food at the base of the tripod. So we were hoping that we'd get kind of larger animals going underneath it, perhaps. These are special food sources that we made. It's a kind of 3D printed mold, and then we could cast these it's called a fat ball, so you can cast it onto a branch. Yeah, one thing worth mentioning is that the garden was private, so it was not something that was accessible to people. So the human experience of experiencing this exhibition was that you kind of looked over the fence into the garden, and therefore there had to be wayfinding to kind of guide you to know where to look. And the art directors of the project for Brompton did a really good job of creating these really nice pieces of wayfinding. So for instance, if you saw this red dot, you would be able to sort of pay more attention, and then you would find something like this, kind of nestled quite deep. It was really positioned primarily for animals, so it was not orientated towards the easiest place for people to experience it, which was also a really interesting thing to do in a design project. Make it kind of animal-centric first and foremost, and then kind of for people as a secondary consideration. This is some footage from the nature scenes. They were in situ for 2 to 3 weeks in September. So we got evidence of squirrels, birds, insects, mice. There's a squirrel holding a stick. That's quite good. There's a little insect on this fat ball. Can you see my cursor there? Bottom left, yeah, insect on a fat ball. And these are sort of, I guess, animals that we expect to see. It's not particularly surprising in terms of the species, but I think what is really special is that you get to see a perspective on these animals uninterrupted by humans. This is their movement whenever no one's watching. You get to see them just kind of doing their thing, which I really like. More examples, different times of day. So the very sort of tall tripod one that I described, this is some footage from that over the course of a few hours. We didn't get any foxes, but it's an experiment. So this footage was published on our website during the exhibition, so you could tune into our website and kind of see what I'm showing you now. But we also had this companion venue, which was across the street from the garden, which happened to be a pub. And we broadcast all of the footage in the pub. So this is like a TV that you normally go and watch like football or cricket or something, and it was, for those 2 weeks, it was like animals. And then we did other things in the pub, like we took over the bar, we made this really nice like origami animal takeover. All of the beer mats in the pub had our like branding on it, and it would like kind of lead you to our website where you could build your own cameras. It was a really nice role reversal of animals intruding on a human habitat rather than the other way around. And yeah, we just had this really amazing contrast or kind of similarity between a squirrel in its own little house, kind of eating and relaxing, and then like people across the street doing something almost exactly the same. So I guess the takeaway from this is like design needs to be bigger than just us, and we have this kind of environmental crisis that we absolutely cannot kind of shy away from. And what I like about this project, I guess, is it's decentering the human, as we would call it. It's acknowledging that we are not the only important thing. So it's doing something significant within that space, but it's also a very creative approach. So I think kind of doing work like this can be quite creative and can be quite playful. And this project has nothing to do with Treviso. It's not made in Treviso, but the gardener in this garden in London, he used to be a barman in Treviso, in the Polo Cafe. Maybe some veterans in the audience, you recognize him? So yeah, closing remarks. I used to think of this journey as a very linear journey, and I guess I've kind of described it as a very linear journey. But now, from this perspective, I think of it as a much more kind of like interconnected thing. And I'm really happy to say that all the places that I've kind of worked and studied, I still have quite a strong connection to, and I have kind of friends and collaborators, and there's so many things that now kind of bridge from one place to another, and I think that's a really kind of special thing to reflect on. All roads lead to Treviso. Thank you.